And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Indiana Hoosiers knock off arch-rival Purdue 77-73 in a game that midway through the second half looked like it would be a laugher. It looked like Indiana would just cruise to the victory, but hat tip to Purdue. They really battled back, made it a bit of a game there at the end. It got it down to a two-point game at 75-73. But A.J. Hammond's block attempt on Yogi Ferrell, his hand hit the rim, caused it to be a goaltend, and the Hoosiers close out the victory 77-73. And we will break it all down for you tonight on this episode of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined by Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Will DeWitt. Our entire crew is here. And so let's get right to it. Let's go around the horn with our opening statements, and let's start with the banner moment. And for me, there were really two plays at the end of the second half that were huge for Indiana. And they were experienced players making big plays, but doing little things to do it. And a lot of people in the lead up to this game said that they thought that, OG would be the key or Juwan Morgan would be the key. And they talked about the freshmen. And to me, the guys who win rivalry games like this, like IU Purdue, are your experienced guys. And tonight, I thought Yogi Ferrell did a great job of getting IU off on the right foot early, but then making the plays late, even when his shots weren't falling. I know that he had kind of the rough play there breaking the press when he got the ball tapped out, and it resulted in Dakota Mathias three-pointer. But the play he made on the rebound, when the score was 73-66, and it felt like Purdue was getting some momentum. Indiana misses a shot. Yogi runs all the way over from the left corner to tap the rebound out. Indiana gets it. It results in a two-pointer for Max Bielfeldt, which pushed the lead back up to 9. And at the time, seemed like a big play, but maybe not a huge play. But those points proved huge because if Indiana doesn't get those 2 points, it might be tied on that play a little bit later when A.J. Hammonds has the goaltend. And then the charge by Colin Hartman, which was actually down, I think, the next time or 2 possessions later, where Purdue, P.J. Thompson is driving in. If he had scored, it would have made it a 75-70 game, and it looked like he had a wide-open lane, but Colin Hartman stepped up, took a charge. And those plays right there, little plays by experienced players hustling to the spot, those plays were the difference. In a game where Indiana was raining threes early in the second half, and again, it looked like they would just breeze by in the second half. The game got tight. Indiana didn't play perfectly, but their experienced players made plays at the end of the game to win it. That's what you need to win Big Ten championships. It's what you need to hang banners. And tonight, Indiana's experienced players did that for them at the end of the game. Excellent job by the Hoosiers, and that's why we're walking away tonight with a victory, an exciting victory, a bit of a whoo there at the end, but a huge victory for Indiana over a good Purdue team. All right, let's go around the horn, get everybody's opening thoughts. And Andy, we will start with you, your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
Well, it's hard to talk about this game without talking about how Troy Williams played, particularly in the first half. Just played with the defensive intensity that I don't think we've seen from him in his 3+ years, or his 2+ years, I guess. Diving on the floor for loose balls on multiple occasions, really was locked in defensively from the get-go. And played smart again. No turnovers, and didn't have a ton of rebounds today, but ended up with 19 points, I think 14 of those in the first half, and just made some big shots. The jumper he hit, the plays he made late when he realized, as Dockage pointed out, that he had Ryan Klein on him, knew he couldn't stay with him, made smart plays to make things happen there. So just thought it was a great all-around game from him. I think the tank was on empty about the 12-minute mark for him of the second half from what he had given. But the good thing was when he and Yogi were off the floor there, IU made a nice run and got some good minutes there before things got away from him a bit there toward the stretch run, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But for me, it was just Troy's enthusiasm and excitement. Never really seen him this pumped up, and I know I saw a couple tweets afterward that they interviewed Yogi after the game. Troy came back out of the locker room and they kind of walked off with their arms around each other, pointing at the crowd. So a cool night for Troy, and a great win for the team.
Ryan, what's your rant tonight?
Man, I gotta give a hat tip to Indiana's big men. Statistically, you go down the list, it may not look like they did a great job because Swanigan had 14, AJ Hammonds had 13, and Isaac Haas had 12. But here's the key stat: Purdue, those three guys combined for 2 offensive rebounds all game. 2. Purdue as a team got 4, and one of those was a team rebound that just went out of bounds. Then you've got Bielfeldt and Bryant each had 10 points. They combined for 11 boards. They both managed to stay without fouling out. They both had 4 fouls. Then you had guys like Juwan Morgan who had a rough time with Swanigan on him, or while he was guarding Swanigan, I mean. And you had OG Anunoby rotating in down low. You saw a little Colin Hartman in there as well. But for the most part, it's on Thomas Bryant and Max Bielfeldt. It was on them to stay in the game, not in get into really bad foul trouble, to basically harass Hammonds and Haas and Swanigan and just make them uncomfortable. Now, those guys scored, but those guys did not beat Indiana, and that was the key because Purdue, everything starts with those 3 guys for Purdue, and our big men stepped up big time tonight. They didn't have, career high in scoring or career high in rebounds or whatever, but they played solid. They played good defense. They made those guys work for everything they got. And there were a couple times they gave up easy buckets, but for the most part, those guys had to work. And really keeping them in check the way they did and staying on the floor and providing positive contributions offensively, that really was a key for Indiana tonight. They didn't get smoked down low like they did last year. They didn't get blown out in the paint, and that is what won this game for Indiana. As I said, those 3 guys for Purdue, they're 3 big guys everybody talks about who are fantastic, had 2 offensive rebounds. Bryant and Bielfeldt combined for 3. So, I think that was the huge thing in the game for us was that our big men stepped up. It's the huge difference between last year's Purdue game and this year's Purdue game. We had competent big men who could step up and have a good game.
Hey, can I just tack on a rant real quick? It's ridiculous that we're not doing this again, another IU Purdue game. It really is ridiculous that these 2 teams don't play twice a year. Big Ten, fix it. That's all I'm going to say about it. Will, your stat of the night.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, throughout the season, I've talked about turnovers being a stat of the night, not usually being a bright stat. Well, tonight, I have to state the obvious here with the bright stat here with turnovers. Purdue came into the game, really poor at actually forcing turnovers, only like 14.5%. But IU did an excellent job of taking care of the ball tonight. They only had 1 turnover in that first half, which was an offensive, foul on Rojo, which isn't really a turnover per se, which like he didn't have a bad pass. He didn't actually just, wasn't stolen or anything. So I thought that was pretty good. We finished the game with only 4 turnovers. That's only 6.5%. For a team that turns the ball over 20% of the time, I can't express how huge it is, especially playing Purdue at home. Limiting the turnovers, you're not getting Purdue any extra shots, and obviously with their run there towards the end, thank God we didn't give them any extra possessions in that first half, or else we might be talking about a whole different outcome tonight.
Yeah, no, great stat, Will. And I've got a little more on the turnovers here in just a second. And we're going to talk some about Indiana's defense, and especially the game that Robert Johnson played. And obviously we hope that Robert's okay. I haven't seen anything on Twitter yet in terms of an update on that injury, which didn't look good. At least he was on the bench. I did see him there at the end of the game kind of rotating his leg around almost, or his foot around almost like he was kind of working on the ankle a little bit. So as soon as we see something, if we see it while we're live here, we will certainly let you know. But we definitely want to break down his game because he played very, very well. Before we do that, though, we have something pretty exciting happening right now on the Assembly Call, which is that for the first time in 5 years of doing the show, we have a sponsor, and we are really excited about it. The guys from SeatGeek reached out to me last week interested in promoting their product here on the Assembly Call. And it seemed like a perfect fit because when we were up in Bloomington a couple of weeks ago and needed tickets for the IU Minnesota game, we realized the night before the game that Will didn't have tickets to the game. And I had tickets. Ryan was going there with his press pass. Andy had tickets. Will didn't have tickets. And so that night we went online, went to SeatGeek, and we found tickets at a great price for the IU Minnesota game. And what's really nice, kind of their differentiator, is they have an algorithm, this technology that they use, which shows you what kind of value the seat is that you're looking for based on kind of historically how much it costs, and you can kind of see if the ticket you're going to get is at a good price based on what you're usually getting at. And it's really, really helpful. And the other nice thing is when you're looking for tickets, a lot of times with other ticket places, there are hidden fees that you see at the end when you get to the checkout. Not so with SeatGeek. And so I use them. I really like them. Andy, I know, uses them. And so we weren't ever going to have a sponsor on this show that we didn't endorse 100%, or that wouldn't be a win-win-win for everybody involved, including our audience. And this will be that, because what SeatGeek is doing for Assembly Call listeners is that if you go and download their app, and they have a free app, just search for SeatGeek in the App Store, and you sign up and add the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, you will get a $20 rebate on your first ticket purchase. If you don't want to use the app, that's okay. Go to the website, SeatGeek.com. There's a little button up at the top that says, did you hear about us on radio or TV? Same thing. It'll ask you when you sign up if you want to add a promo code. Add the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. So again, when you need your tickets, go to SeatGeek. You'll get a $20 rebate off of that first purchase. Plus, it's just a much better experience than anywhere else, and that's why we use it, and that's why we are encouraging you to use it as well. SeatGeek, download the app, go to the website, add the promo code ASSEMBLY, and get your $20 rebate. All right, everybody, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. It is a victorious episode of the Assembly Call IU postgame show, and really the best kind of victorious episode because it's a win over the Purdue Boilermakers. And you know, when you looked at this game coming in, you know, I like to look at what does a loss look like against a good opponent. You know, so when Purdue has lost games this year, the 6 games they've lost, what has that looked like? Well, typically Vince Edwards, Raphael Davis, and Ryan Klein don't get off. We saw Vince Edwards get 12 points, a lot of them late, but Raphael Davis I don't think scored, and he's a guy who when Purdue loses only averages 4 points a game. We held him under that. Ryan Klein, in 4 out of 6 losses for Purdue coming in, had 0 3 points. He only had 3. Purdue coming into the game didn't force many turnovers. They were last in the Big Ten. And in losses, they were forcing the opponents turned it over only about 12% of the time. I wondered if Indiana could get their turnovers that low. The Hoosiers cut it in half at the 6.6%, which is why that was Will's stat of the night, and block shots. Last year, Purdue blocked Indiana's shot 17% of the time. Tonight, only 2 block shots for Purdue, which was just 3.3% of the time. So those big keys, Indiana did well in all of them. But, Andy, I want to talk with you about the defense because when you look at the final numbers, Purdue ends up scoring 1.19 points per possession, hitting all those shots late. So the numbers aren't going to look pretty. But I thought Indiana's defense for most of the night was really, really good considering what their goals were, what they wanted to do, and the way that they were able to, as Ryan said, kind of frustrate Purdue's big men and not let them just go off. And I thought a guy who had a huge part in it was Robert Johnson, who for a while there had only taken 1 shot and was playing about as well as you can play with only taking 1 shot. But his doubling, his effort and activity were fantastic, and I thought he was a huge part of the reason why Indiana's defense for most of the night was outstanding.
Yeah, he did a really good job of doubling down. I think Purdue came out and was pounding it into Hammonds early, as I think anybody would have expected, and so IU went and started doubling the post really early with him. I was actually surprised they never switched to his zone just to kind of give a different look, but you know they really started running Yogi and Robert Johnson to double down there, and I think there were a number of times that Johnson would get his hands in there and just kind of disrupt the rhythm, and at that point, and Purdue got back in the game. There's probably a number of reasons for that late. I mean, they started to hit threes, but those were the shots that IU was willing to give them early, and force them to make some of those shots in order to, get IU out of what it was doing defensively. But I thought it really kind of threw off the rhythm of Hammonds and Haas when they could get there. There were certainly times they didn't get there in time, and then it also forced Purdue to make changes. So they started playing Swanigan a little bit more like on the other side on the post, and that really clogged the lane a little bit. For things. I think, Dockage brought up a good point. I think you mentioned in the Iowa game as well that, watching IU where they're really able to kind of run guys off the three-point line but still clog up the lane, it's kind of in some ways the opposite of what IU wants to do offensively in terms of shoot layups and threes or shots around the rim. Those are the 2 things they're really trying to take away on the defensive end, and they've done a pretty good job of that and just being active and some of those things. And they're just throwing different guys at them. Part of it was because everybody had fouls, but just given different looks, you could rotate different players onto their big guys and kind of show them some different things. So there were certainly times when they got beat post position early. I think Bryant had that a couple times where it's just at a certain point, if you let the guy get position right under the rim, it doesn't really matter. The double team can't come fast enough at that point. So there were pieces that didn't work very well, but I thought that IU did a really good job of doubling the post, rotating and recovering when Purdue would kick it out, and forcing Purdue to take the shots that IU wanted them to take. And quite honestly, they had a bunch of guys who didn't look like they wanted to take those shots early and really bogged down offensively, particularly when Hammonds was out of the game with foul trouble in the first half.
Yeah. And Ryan, the other thing is, Tom Crean on his pregame talk with Fish talked about how he really wanted Indiana to play technical on defense, but aggressive, and really, get in passing lanes. And I thought you saw Indiana get a lot of steals, be active with the double teams. And he said that we had to make Purdue uncomfortable. And that was his big buzzword after the Michigan State game, is we let them be too comfortable. And tonight, we didn't do that. We made Purdue uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think Purdue never really looked fully comfortable on offense. A few times they came down and had a guy, as Andy said, in great post position, and they just put something up real quick. But for the most part, they had to work very hard. I don't care what your shooting percentage is. If you're if a team's going to shoot well like that and have a high shooting percentage, the way to slow them down is to make them take the entire clock, to limit the number of possessions. And I think that's what Indiana did, and that's how this became a 17-point game, because Purdue was working really hard and not getting clean looks at the rim. I think that, first of all, that started on the interior, not giving, making those guys work, making them have to, work to get position, work to find an opening, and then work to score. But then the outside shooters, and Dan Dockage was talking about this, big fan of the show, Dan Dockage, was talking about this during the game, is that Indiana was closing out to the perimeter, and they were hassling the guys on the perimeter. They were getting out to shooters, and then when those guys would try to drive, the lane was so clogged with defenders that they'd have to kick it out, or they'd have to do something else, or they'd have to force something. So it just never seemed like Purdue was comfortable the entire night. Now, they hit a bunch of shots late, and that's to their credit for working hard and getting some shots, but those are shots they don't normally hit, and so I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, we gave up some clean looks towards the end, but these are guys hitting shots they don't usually hit, and they were able to come back because of that. But at the same time, Indiana worked really hard to earn the fact that they had a big lead at that point, that a guy making a bunch of shots is protected because of that big lead. So there was a mixed bag towards the end, but I feel like they played such good defense on the interior and then working their way out, pressuring shooters, being aggressive, and not letting Purdue get open looks. And you could count on one hand the amount of open looks Purdue got tonight, and I thought it was really a great effort defensively.
Yeah, I agree. And let's look at the other side and talk about the offense. And Will, you pose an interesting question here in the chat. Indiana played slower tonight. A bit of a slower pace than normal. Did that contribute at all to the lack of turnovers? And Andy, I want to get your thoughts on this. It really felt like Indiana didn't have any of those boneheaded, just facepalm turnovers, that we often see them have. And just reducing those 3 or 4 turnovers that seem to come every game was a huge help. I mean, the first few turnovers, one was on an offensive foul where Robert Johnson's making an aggressive move and just pushes off a bit. Another one was, an outlet pass, and it just happened, the pass just ended up being a little bit awry. Like, they were good, aggressive turnovers tonight when they did happen, and they didn't happen very much. And again, part of that is Purdue is a really good defensive team, but, I mean, they are the worst in the Big Ten at forcing turnovers and one of the worst in the country. To put it in perspective, they are worse at forcing turnovers in terms of their rank in the country than Indiana is at committing them. And so, you had to expect Indiana would be a little bit better, but what else did you see tonight, Andy, that helps Indiana reduce the turnovers? Because, in the end, when you win by 4, every one of those possessions was huge.
Yeah, I do think ending up playing a little bit slower helped. Obviously from that's why we look at turnover rate, so that takes that part of the equation out of it. But I didn't feel like there were a ton of transition situations where IU really got out of control. But I also think when they did pick their spots and they ran when they needed to, and I think that average possession probably went up a decent amount during some of these, the late game possessions where they, they really held the ball. Although there were a couple down the stretch where they probably took too quick of shots, but I do think it played a factor. But I think we've seen a little bit from this team over the, as the season's gone on. Troy being one of the bigger culprits over the course of the season, when he plays under control like he really has over these last couple games. We've always talked about for these last couple of years, it feels like they're just contagious, and one turnover turns into 3, and so there's times when he often is like the the first snowflake that goes into the snowball that starts to roll downhill, and I think with him playing a little more under control, it's not quite as frenetic. But and part of it is just that as odd as it is to say, Purdue defensively just it is not what I think everybody thought they would be this year, and what they have been at during large parts of Painter's tenure, and so they really struggled there. And the other thing that IU has going for them is they have a lot of guys that can handle the ball. Even late in the game when they had OG bring the ball up the floor, when they knowing that Purdue doesn't want to extend Haas or Hammonds or Swanigan that far down the court, so they have Bielfeldt and OG in the backcourt together, and those guys took good care of the ball and did some nice things there. So I think it's probably a combination of a lot of factors, but I think there's a lot of guys that right now they trust with the ball in their hands. I think that's a good thing to feel, and we'll see if they can carry that over against Illinois on the road the next game out.
Well, you've got a couple interesting stats here to come in with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're just talking about offense, so I can definitely start there real quick. I mean, we had a 50% assisted field goals made. We had 14 assists on 28 made field goals, which I think kind of just goes with playing a little bit slower. You can make that extra pass take a little bit more time. And we also finished with a 3.5 assist to turnover ratio, which kind of just talks about both the assists compared to the turnovers, which obviously for IU, that number's been kind of low throughout the season because we turn it over so darn much. But to have a 3.5 is pretty darn good. At one point, it was actually a 6.5 before we kind of had those turnovers there late towards the end. And then switching back here to defense, I want to talk about our steals real quick. I think they're just kind of indicative of how aggressive our defense is playing. I mean, IU had 8 steals today. Troy had 4 of them, so that's half just from Troy alone, which I'm sure we're going to talk about Troy later on because he had such a stellar game. But that's 13.3%, steals for every position for Purdue, who usually only gets stolen about 8.9% of the time, which, I mean, that's 207th in the country, which isn't great. But to have 13.3%, steals, I thought was just great. And like you said in our chat, too, it really helped that run there in the second half.
Yeah, and to put that number, 13.3% of the steal rate, to put that into perspective, if that were Indiana's season-long rate, it would be 4th in the country, right after West Virginia and VCU, 2 teams obviously known for wreaking havoc with their defense and forcing steals. And Indiana has been really good at that this year. Indiana's percentage, I think, coming in was about 10.6. Something like that, but they were in the top 100, so they've been good at it. They were absolutely stellar at it tonight, which was great. Ryan, I want to talk about Thomas Bryant and Max Bielfeldt, and we've talked about them defensively, but they were huge offensively in the second half because, it was kind of a tale of two halves on the offensive end for Indiana. In the first half, Yogi Ferrell and Troy Williams combined for 28 points. They were terrific, and they still did a nice job in the second half, but between them, they only scored 9 more points. The guys that really stepped it up in the second half were Thomas and Max, and I think Thomas may have had 2 points in the first half, but Max didn't score, and they finished with 20. So between them, they scored at least 18 points, and they were really big when Indiana was making that run in the second half. And if you remember early in the second half, Purdue would kind of get it to 6 or get it to 8, and we would make a 3. Max would hit a 3, or Thomas would drive. In fact, Thomas had the first 7 points of the second half. And I thought, especially with Thomas, Ryan, it was interesting how Tom Crean was using him, really pulling him away from the basket, allowing him to drive more and kind of show off more of his skills. Do you think that was a matchup thing, or do you think that's something that we'll start to see a little bit more with him?
Remember last year when Indiana played Maryland and they didn't have a big guy because Hunter Perea was out? Well, it's arguable they didn't have a big guy to begin with. But Colin Hartman started at the 5, and that was a brilliant move by Tom Crean. Spread out Maryland, outshot him, destroyed Maryland at IU. Putting Thomas Bryant on the perimeter for some of the offensive sets was that move this year. It was something that probably nobody expected, and you had him out there for longer stretches of time. You've had him out there earlier this year, maybe set a screen and step out or something like that, but he was legitimately running the weave and doing some of those things on the perimeter, taking A.J. Hammonds away from the basket, and then when he didn't have Hammonds on him, he'd go right down to the post because he could battle with Haas, he could battle with Swanigan. But when A.J. Hammonds was on him a lot of the time, he pulled him away from the basket. That opened up offensive rebounds for everybody. That also opened up the lane for the guards to drive. It was a genius move. We don't often say that about Tom Crean coaching decisions, but that is one that nobody can argue with. That was brilliant. And one of the best parts about that was Thomas Bryant getting that 7-0 run by himself. And one of them was he stepped out for a three, and Hammonds just stood there like, yeah, you're not going to shoot that. And he just buried it right in his face. And Thomas looked surprised because he didn't know how to do a three-point celebration on his run back. And then about halfway down the court, he's like, oh, yeah, three, yeah. So you got it. You're right. The big men really stepped up in the second half, especially because they started overplaying Yogi. Troy started, only had 5 points in the second half. As we said, Yogi only had 4. They started overplaying those guys and really defending against those guys. And so it was easy to transition to, okay, let's rely on other people. OG Anunoby had 9 points in the second half as well, and he's, sort of a front court player. But Bielfeldt and Thomas Bryant combined for 18 points and 10 rebounds in the second half. And that was absolutely enormous for IU because, again, as I said in the opening, they provided that base on the interior to work out from, and it also made it so Purdue could not just stand out on shooters. They had to respect the postgame. They had to collapse. They had to help out sometimes. And, that was the key. As I said in the opening, that was the key to the game for me, was that those guys stepped up, carried their load. Bielfeldt hit 2 huge threes, and continued to, the play where he beat Hammonds on the inside, where he tried it up and under, and Hammonds didn't bite, and he just kind of threw it around him and went in. I mean, that was enormous for momentum and things like that. So those two guys played phenomenal games. It may not show up. Neither guy scored 20 points. Neither guy had double-digit rebounds, but they played phenomenal basketball, and I thought they were the key to the win.
Yeah, and I thought, just to piggyback on that a little bit, one of the Purdue players I saw a quote on Twitter after the game said Bielfeldt was really the difference maker once he hit those couple threes, and I think it just, similar to what Bryant was able to do when they would isolate him out there, just spreads the floor so much. And so if you think about those couple baskets that Yogi made late, both on the goaltend and the other kind of driving layup where he split 2 guys, that was all possible because Purdue couldn't just let Haas or Hammonds stand by the rim and wait for somebody to get there. They had to go out on guys like Max and Thomas, and so it opens up that many lanes for other guys to be able to make shots in the lane. And I thought that Max making those shots early was huge, and he nearly made that one from the corner as well. But it just, his presence out there had a similar effect to the Ryan's comparison of what Hartman did against Maryland. It really stretches the defense in different ways. And again, we kind of talk about making Purdue uncomfortable. That was a case where they really weren't able to get comfortable on defense. They're not used to having to challenge guys out on the perimeter. And the thing I loved about Max late, when Purdue kind of made a run, he made a couple big buckets. He wanted the ball. He and Yogi ran some nice pick and rolls. I think one of those just happened to kind of glance off the rim. But the other basket that Ryan talked about was a big one where he wanted the ball inside, wanted to go through and attack, and can't go without saying the couple offensive fouls that he drew on Hammonds, which one of which was probably a little cheap, but just good veteran play. So he had a big game on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, because Brian Cardinal or Chris Kramer wouldn't have done the exact same thing.
Oh, they would have. They would have acted like they got shot, but that's neither here nor there.
Hey, by the way, it goes without saying, but thank you, John Beeline. Thank you. Hey, so real quick.
We love you, John. The fruit basket is on the way, my friend.
This is quickly turning into in football season when IU had to thank, I think they did this on Crimson Cast, they would take time of each show to thank UAB for screwing up their football program and giving IU Jordan Howard. So I think we need to have it'll be like a running segment on the show now where we just thank John Beeline, send him some kind of edible arrangement or whatever. We take up, maybe that's what, if people want to donate, we use some of the donations for that, just to say thanks.
What if every Assembly Call audience member sent John Beeline a handwritten thank you note for Max Bielfeldt? That would be the greatest thing ever. Let's do that. We need to make that happen. All right. I have there's going to be a little pop quiz for you guys because there were some crazy stats to come out of this game, and we're going to get to those crazy stats in a second. Plus, Will wants to talk more about Yogi, and we know that Doc Libby wants us to talk more about Yogi, and so we're going to do both of those things here in just a second. I do want to let you guys know we added some new gear to our gear page. If you go to assemblycall.com/gear, had a guy email me this week and asked me when we were going to add coffee mugs with the Assembly Call logo on it because, as he said, he's married to a Kentucky fan, and all he wants to see is his Kentucky fan wife drinking coffee out of an Assembly Call mug. How could I say no to that email? So I went immediately, and we got the coffee mugs on the site. You can either get it with the full Assembly Call logo or the text logo. You can order them there. 20% of the proceeds goes to support the Assembly Call. So go to assemblycall.com/gear. You can get the coffee mugs. You can get the limestone coasters. You can get the sweatshirt that Ryan wears for every show. You can see it down there with the logo on it. It's beautiful. But again, go to assemblycall.com/gear. It's a great way to support the show, but get something cool for yourself while you do it. We greatly, greatly appreciate it, and we hope that you enjoy the gear there. And if there's something there that you want but isn't there, always feel free to email me. There's a contact form right there on that page. Let me know what you're looking for, and we will make sure that it gets on that page. Alrighty, folks, we are here on the Assembly Call celebrating Indiana's 77-73 victory over Purdue. I predicted 77-71. Purdue made it a little bit closer than that. Who cares? It's a victory. I actually had someone on Twitter, I'm not making this up, and I don't even know why I'm saying this out loud, but I had someone who said because they came back, it kind of felt like a loss. No, sir. That's a top 25 Purdue team in Assembly Hall. Beating Purdue never feels like a loss. It was a terrific performance. Purdue made some great shots late, but that doesn't take away from the great performance of Indiana. Okay, guys, get ready because you have to tell me which of these stats is crazier, all right? I'm going to list them out. Troy Williams getting 4 steals. Troy Williams having no turnovers. Indiana out-rebounding the Big Ten's best rebounding team on both the offensive and defensive end. Or, listen to this one. There were 7 possessions that ended with Troy Williams, Thomas Bryant, or Juwan Morgan taking 3-pointers today. 7 possessions. On those 7 possessions, Indiana scored 1.7 points per possession, which is phenomenal. So let's go around the horn real quick. You tell me which of those stats blows your mind more. Ryan, you first.
It's the Troy turnovers, and I don't think there's any question. The other stats are great, and they're crazy, but Troy Williams in a big game had 0 turnovers, guys, and he played 34 minutes. That's it. I'm done. I'm dropping the mic. It's over.
Andy, do you agree with Ryan?
I concur.
Will, any controversy here or no?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I have the nephew watching the game today, and he kept saying, good Troy, so I was excited. It was a good day for that. I didn't want to teach him bad Troy today.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it is Troy. And the great thing about his lack of turnovers is, again, it wasn't like he didn't play, and it wasn't like he wasn't aggressive. Troy was terrific. I mean, we saw more of the Nebraska Troy Williams, and frankly, we saw more of all Big Ten Troy again tonight. He didn't have the rebounds, only the 1 rebound, but the 4 steals more than made up for the lack of rebounds, and the 19 points,
Jared,
7 of 11 from the field. He was great.
Jared, I mean, Troy Williams was the best player on the floor tonight. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, I think that we've kind of glossed over it talking about the nitty-gritty. I still think that the big men were the key to the game. But Troy Williams is the best player on the floor, and there's no question. On both ends.
Okay, but there might be a
great
question.
defense.
Because I think Yogi Ferrell was the best player on the floor overall. When you consider the way that he came out and the way that he started the game, and he finished with 18 points, he did have 4 assists. He had some really tough rebounds. And again, let's not undersell how important the rebounding was for Indiana. Because Purdue, again, the best rebounding team in the Big Ten on the offensive and defensive end, and some of those rebounds Yogi had were huge. 2 of them were offensive. 1 led directly to a bucket. And he had a couple more shots in the second half that were down and just rimmed out. Why does that rim hate Yogi? I don't understand it. But I thought Yogi was terrific. His mental lapse at the end where they knocked the ball away from him, notwithstanding. Other than that, he did a great job with the press. Will, you wanted to speak about Yogi and especially how he played in the first half.
Yeah, all right. Coming in, I had one player I was watching for, and it was Yogi. Why? Well, since the Michigan game where he scored 17 points and shot 60% from the field, he's only been 10 of 42 from the field, which is 23.8%, and 12 points per game in those last 4 games. And, obviously going up against Purdue, you're going to need Yogi, your leader, your senior point guard, to play strong, especially early. Well, thank God he did. I mean, in the first half, he had 14 points. He shot 5 of 7, and he only missed the 2 threes, and that was 71.4% from the field. Much improved from the 23.8% he's been shooting in the last 4 games. So I thought that was very big for him to come out as quick as he did.
Andy, do you have a vote here between best player of the game between Yogi and Troy?
Oh man, I don't know. It's like picking between my favorite between my two kids. Although based on the behavior of one of them lately, clearly there is a favorite at this point. But I'll just let everybody just have to guess which one that is. But no,
Poor Mallory.
I don't know. Oh, man, how'd you know? I guess I'm inclined to go with Troy just because I think other guys seeing him play the way that he was playing really helped set the tone. I mean, again, like I just keep going back to, I'm not. It sounds terrible to like make a big deal that he like dove on the floor 3 times for loose balls, but he just played with a passion that I don't think we've seen from him, where there just seemed like there would be times that he was, I don't want to say, even want to say like emotionless, but he would, make plays and he would kind of get excited, but like you never really got the like, I really care so much about winning this game. And I think that was what stood out to me from the first half, is like everything he did just showed like a level of passion, caring, whatever you want to call it, that I just don't feel like we've seen enough, and that doesn't mean that he doesn't care and hasn't cared over the course of time, but just like visibly, I thought it was a really good, kind of tone setter for the team, and so I guess I would lean slightly toward him, although you'll get no argument from me about either one of those guys.
Man, Jeff Rabjohns just tweeted the greatest picture of Yogi and Troy with their arms around each other with huge smiles on their faces. I love seeing pictures like that after a big win. Ryan, let me ask you this. We've seen some of Troy's best basketball of the year these last 2 games. And granted, the games have been at home, and Troy has played much better at home, and we need to see him play like this, on the road. And I think a lot of people think, Troy is a junior, that he's probably going to leave after this season. Do you think at all, and we know that seniors sometimes when they come around their last go-around in the Big Ten start to get a little bit more of a sense of urgency. We saw it with Yogi at the beginning of Big Ten play. Do you think we're starting to see that with Troy maybe a little bit here as he kind of considers that this may be his last time around the block in the Big Ten?
I mean, honestly, I don't want to speculate on that kind of stuff. I just don't think it's fair to the players. Whatever is causing Troy to focus and play the way he is, I hope he has more of it. I think that from the get-go, to get to the Yogi Troy thing, I think that Yogi off the jump was obviously the best player on the floor. Right from the get-go, he was shooting, he was hitting shots. Clearly, this is his last game against Purdue. He wants, he wanted to bury him, and he wanted to win this big. What I think made Troy for me the best player in this game, and it's not a knock on Yogi. It just talks about to in my opinion, to rank higher than Yogi tonight, he had to play out of this world, and I think he did. And the key for me was defensively. He was harassing everybody. He was using his length and his athleticism to just sort of get in the way. He was guarding Swanigan at times. He was guarding, Edwards at times. He was all over the place. He was switching with everybody, and he was using his length to make sure that on the perimeter guys didn't get shots, and then on the inside he was using athleticism to make sure that Swanigan didn't get easy buckets. So I think that that when you put those two things together and throw in the fact, and also on defense, he didn't foul anybody. He had 0 personal fouls tonight, which is enormous when you're playing aggressive defense like that, especially a guy like Troy, who has a tendency to not move his feet, who has a tendency to get handsy and dive in after the ball. And instead, he played sound defense, didn't foul. He took smart shots. He took 4 threes tonight, and usually when he takes 4 threes, I'm on here screaming about it. But I thought all 4 were good shots or necessary shots late in the shot clock. I just think that, and maybe it's in comparison. We've just come to expect Yogi to be who he was tonight. But I just think that Troy elevated his game to a level that brought everybody else up, and offensively and defensively. And I think he was the touchstone and the guy that, as Andy said, guys saw him diving on the floor. He was setting an example for everybody else. I mean, that's leadership. And we don't typically associate that with Troy. And he played like he really wanted this. So, I think that Troy had a great night. I thought Yogi had a fantastic night, and good for Yogi. in his final game against Purdue to show up and play a great game and get off the shooting slump and just have a really good all-around game on both ends of the floor as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and you're right. It's not fair to speculate like that, so thanks for holding me accountable, because that was a bad question that I sent your way. Hey, real quick, Andy, let's talk a little bit about the bench, because I didn't have real high hopes for the freshmen tonight just because it's their first IU Purdue game, and yet, Thomas Bryant, 10 points, 5 boards, and was really good in the second half. OG, I thought, really made some nice plays late, scored 9 points, and I thought had some just terrific defensive possessions in the second half. And even Juwan Morgan knocked down that three-pointer, played some good D. I thought the bench, and Nick Zeisloft apparently had the best plus-minus on the team at plus 12, despite not making a three, which is crazy, and maybe shows a limitation of plus-minus, but that's neither here nor there. What were your thoughts on the bench tonight? Because I thought, for the most part, they stepped up and did a pretty good job.
Yeah, they really did. I mean, they got thrust in pretty early with the foul trouble in the first half. So, Morgan came out really confidently, hit that three, and also on a couple plays after that had the presence of mind to, not force a shot in the lane. Turned, kicked it out to Yogi, and I thought, and Yogi ended up burying the three from the corner. I thought he played a really good game, forced a jump ball late, just continues to be a guy who can defend multiple positions. So I thought he played well, continued his strong play. Recently, OG kind of got back to, what we'd seen from him, was still aggressive, hit a three in the second half, and the second one, I think, had it gone in, the roof might have come off, but, I thought he played a really good game. Again, they struggled defensively. Part of that is, even though they've got some strength to them, and they don't necessarily have the, kind of wiry body of, most freshmen, they're just going to struggle with veteran guys in the post, I think, at times. So, but they battled. I thought that was the one thing. Morgan got fouls just because he was fighting guys down in the post, and, to me, I'll take an error of that kind where you can get it. So I thought both those guys played really well, and the other one is Harrison. I guess it's Nego. I looked it up in the media guide, and it says Niego in the pronunciation thing, but everybody's calling him Nego now, so I'm going to go with that.
Harrison corrected everybody. It is Nego, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Makes no sense.
Ken Sterling might jump through your headset and strangle you if you say Niego, so just beware.
Okay. Well, good that I got it right then. But I thought he gave some really good minutes, really during both halves, and just a guy who, continues to make smart plays. He gets into people defensively. A ball mover on offense. Some of the same kinds of things that we say about Colin Hartman, who I guess his performance for tonight counts as a bench performance since he didn't start the first half. But Nego just made a number of good plays. Stepped into a three in the first half. Didn't make it, but it was a good shot within the flow of the offense. I just think he continues to give them good minutes, and certainly if it's a case where Robert Johnson is going to be out for any period of time, you're going to see more of him, unless IU really wants to start playing more of these, the big lineups that they showed at times tonight. So I think, obviously nothing we could have foreseen, but good that he's been able to get some more minutes lately, and hopefully will be comfortable if he's asked to play a few more minutes. But I thought he gave good minutes. Zeisloft, as you said, did some nice things. Didn't score, but he might have only taken one shot,
yeah, he took two
if that.
threes.
But I thought, yeah. So I thought anybody who came in off the bench played well. They even went to Ryan Burton a little bit, just with so many guys in foul trouble. But I think we're continuing to see among the themes of this season is that the bench has consistently contributed to victories and consistently played well even in defeat. So it isn't always the same guy, but a number of different guys stepping up. And I think if we find that Robert Johnson is going to miss some games, it's going to be a next man up and see who can step in and do that. But I think certainly from a fan perspective and certainly from the coaching staff's perspective, there's a lot of confidence in the guys that are coming in off the bench right now.
So, and real quick, let's address the elephant in the room, and I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's all speculation, but let's talk about Robert Johnson real quick and what the impact of that injury could be. And just for the record, I haven't seen anything on Twitter. I don't expect much information on this injury. If you have been paying attention to IU and injuries in the Crean era, you will know that you don't get much information. They are as tight-lipped about injuries as anybody, and you might see a headline on SI.com in like 2 weeks about a surgery or something and maybe not hear anything before that. So I wouldn't expect to hear anything. We may just have to wait until the Illinois game to see if Robert's there, to the Iowa game and see if Robert's there. But, I mean, Ryan, what do you think? Let's say that he does have to miss a few games. Now, with 3 to go and Indiana really in the driver's seat in the Big Ten, how big of a loss is that? Because to me it seems really significant.
Yeah, he's the guy who's really stepped up on both ends of the floor this year. I mean, tonight he only had 6 points, but they were both 2 huge threes, and he just wasn't, he's the kind of guy where if he doesn't get looks in the offense, he's not going to force anything, and so he just kept the ball moving tonight and moved it down the line and ran the offense, and he didn't need to, go off to have a big game. And then defensively, as it kept getting mentioned during the game, he was playing a phenomenal game defensively as well. He's very important to Indiana. I think he's probably our best perimeter defender. Yogi is certainly there as well. I mean, they're both basically 1A, 1B, whichever way you want to go. So if he's out, I think you're probably going to see Nick Zaislav getting some more time, maybe starting just because he's a senior and he's steady. But then I think you'll see guys like OG Anunoby playing more on the perimeter. Troy Williams will probably take over a more perimeter-oriented role. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it because you've got your two basic off guards would then be out because Blackman would be gone, and then your top combo guard, who is Robert Johnson, will be out as well. Hopefully, he's not out that long. I mean, the fact that they didn't take him immediately to the locker room was a huge deal in my opinion, even though it was late in the game. Some people were saying, oh well, they're just leaving him out there to watch the end of the game. That's not how it works. If you're badly injured, they take you to the locker room. I think he banged his ankle on the ground. I didn't see it roll. I didn't see it twist. This is a guess just from watching replays. It looked like he hammered it on the ground, and it might have been sort of a dead leg soreness situation. If you roll your ankle that badly as to where you can't walk on it, usually you're not in that much pain. He was in a ton of pain. So that usually means that it's some kind of surface injury. So, not being a doctor, I am the son of a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. That's just my speculation on it. But again, the fact that they left him on the bench, to me, signaled that it probably wasn't something that is season-ending or really serious that they were very seriously concerned about. Obviously, he didn't come back at the game. We'll find out more when they go to Illinois. But for now, I feel better after watching that than I did after they went to commercial after he got hurt, because he didn't go straight to the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, do you look at that as something that could be the difference between Indiana winning the Big Ten title and not?
I feel like it's too early to say. I mean, we talked about even at the beginning of the season, guard depth was going to be something that was a potential issue this season, and so you start the season with 4 that you feel like you can trust, or what you're going to get from, and you might be down to 2 for some period of time. So it's probably too early to say. Obviously, I'm too emotionally invested in it as the president of the Robert Johnson fan club, so I'm not sure I could give you an unbiased answer anyway. But no, hopefully it's nothing. I mean, I think the good thing is that the next game's not until Thursday. There's a little bit of extra time there between games. I think that helps a little bit. It's also don't have a game next weekend, so in theory, if he missed that game and he sits out 10 days, maybe he's back for Iowa. Obviously, pretty early to speculate without knowing too much about what the injury is. So, sure, they'll work to get him back, and other guys will be ready to step in and play. And it may be a case where you see IU go with the game plan a little bit like what Purdue did tonight and really try to take advantage of a size advantage that they're going to have against Illinois on the inside, and maybe start playing some of these bigger lineups and go from there. So I think certainly you'd miss him from a defensive standpoint because he's proven to be one of the team's better defenders, particularly on the perimeter. But I guess we'll just have to sort it out and see what happens when if and when they announce more. But as you said, I don't think it's even specific to IU at this point. When you don't really have to disclose a lot about injuries, it really has no benefit to you to do so. So the fans will be guessing, and I'm sure you and Alex Bozich and everybody else is going to get a boatload of questions this week that I don't know that anybody's going to have a lot of answers to leading up to that Illinois game.
Well, here's something that you do have answers to, which is what is this team like that Indiana is going to be facing in Illinois? And so give us the quick scouting report. Just for context, Indiana obviously went up to Penn State and lost. Penn State is the 127th ranked team in KenPom. Illinois right now is 126th, and they're a team that has lost 6 out of their last 9 games. Their wins over that stretch were an overtime win against Minnesota and a triple overtime win over Rutgers, and then another win over Rutgers. So they haven't exactly shown that they can beat anybody good, and yet I'm kind of a little bit nervous about this game. Why is that?
Well, I think the play when they scored on that like backdoor cut at the buzzer to beat IU a couple years ago probably weighs heavily on your mind as it does with most IU fans. And just for as well as this team has played on the road in stretches, even against some of the lesser teams in the Big Ten, I think road games in the Crean era still scare any IU fans quite a bit. So I'm sure you're not alone in that fear. And I also feel like you're in a difficult spot where big rivalry game tonight, a little bit of a letdown potential for that. Iowa's the next game up, even though it's almost a week after the Illinois game. I think that's one thing where maybe if that's next weekend, it's a little bit closer. You can do some of those things, but yeah, I think it's one that they should win. There's no reason that they should not. They need to go in and take care of business. But yeah, as you said, Illinois really hasn't beaten anybody. They've had injuries. They've had all kinds of issues here and there, but they don't have a ton of size inside. They don't have a ton of depth. And really, again, it's kind of the same story as when they played before. Malcolm Hill and Kendrick Nunn are the guys who are really going to be important to watch for them and see what they can do. So Illinois plays at Wisconsin tomorrow. So if anybody wants to, kind of see how they look, that's going to be a tough game. They're going to be coming back off of, and they've really struggled. So outside of that Purdue game. And the fact that they jumped up and beat them by 14 points, there's not a lot that when you look from a scheduling standpoint to be worried about, but it's still a Big Ten road game. We see night in, night out this college basketball season, teams losing to people who 3 days earlier you'd never think that they would. So I think that it's certainly one IU should win, but I probably join you in a little bit of fear, I guess is probably the better word based on recent events. But again, feels like one IU should win at the fake Assembly Hall.
Yeah, and hopefully Indiana can go get the job done there, which will allow us to savor this victory a little bit longer. And there's going to be a wait now. I mean, Indiana playing today at the 20th. The next game is the 25th. Indiana only plays one game between now and March 1st when they go play at Iowa. So a little bit of a break, which may be good, for the guys. Get a little bit of a rest and give all of us a rest before what should be a furious finish to the season with a lot of important games and then obviously tournament play, which again, hopefully we'll have a lot of games for the Hoosiers. Well, real quick, before we get to our picks, our last call, and then Ryan has something very important that he wants to discuss. I do want to just offer one quick reminder to get on our email list. It's assemblycall.com/subscribe, or you can text Indiana, INDIANA, to the number 44144. You'll get a reply message. Just submit your email address, and you'll be on our list. We send a post-game analysis email the morning after every game that we only send to subscribers. It's the only way to get it. There were almost 1,700 fans. I think it was 1,691 on the email list this morning. It may be at 1,700 by now. But join that list. Make sure that you get those emails because it's a great way to connect with the show and to get some of our best content, which you can't get anywhere else. So again, assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. Alrighty, well, we are wrapping things up here on a victorious, celebratory episode of the Assembly Call as Indiana knocks off rival Purdue 77-73. And hey, Texas A&M beat Kentucky, so it's always nice when Indiana wins, when Purdue loses, when Kentucky loses. It's a good day for Hoosiers everywhere. Ryan, real quick, you wanted to talk about Indiana's current standing in the Big Ten, which certainly was buoyed by tonight's victory, now sitting in 12-3. And really in the driver's seat right now for a Big Ten title.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to point out. A lot of people a couple weeks ago said that Iowa really had an easy stretch to close the season while it was flipped for Indiana and a really difficult stretch. Well, now if you look at it, Iowa faces Wisconsin, who obviously has been having a pretty good season, was just on a 7-game winning streak and had that snap, but is 8-5 in conference and playing much better than they were at the beginning of the season. Then you've got at Ohio State. People don't realize this. Ohio State's 10-5 and currently in 4th place in the Big Ten. A team that's really snuck up on a lot of people, and Iowa has to go play at Ohio State. Then Iowa hosts us and finishes the season at Ann Arbor. While that wasn't a difficult game for Indiana, that's a tough place to play, and we all know that. So Iowa doesn't have an easy stretch to end the season either. And then you look at Maryland, who's on a 2-game losing streak, the other team that's sort of in this Big Ten title chase. And they host Michigan tomorrow, go at Purdue, who's going to be salty after this loss, at least I hope so. And then they host Illinois, and then they play at Indiana to end the season. We know Assembly Hall has been tough on ranked opponents that come in for the past couple years. So everybody sort of has a tough stretch run. This isn't something where the other teams are cruising and Indiana's got a real tough slate. I mean, that's the way it looked like 3-4 weeks ago, that Indiana was going to have this really tough stretch. Right now, Indiana, as Andy said, go at Illinois, take care of business. Then you got 2 games left, and you're playing for the Big Ten title in both. But right now, Indiana has 3 games left in the regular season, which is sad because that means you'll be seeing less of us. But at the same time, it's happy because they could win a Big Ten title and then make a run in the tournament. I mean, this is real, guys. This is getting really real, and Indiana could do something special here. And I just think it's good to keep that in perspective, that we really have something special on our hands, and there are 3 games left, and all 3 are winnable. Look, those other 3 teams have all struggled at different times this year, and all 3 final games are winnable.
Just one note: if anybody wants a good chuckle outside of any other pretty related laughs you might want to get on a night like tonight, go out and search for Jay Sean Tate of Ohio State. I think it was him at least. Went with the floor slap as the Nebraska guy comes up the court. He basically slaps the floor twice in front of him. Well, by the time as he's slapping the court, the Nebraska guy is driving past him. So it's really good. It's really good comedy, and perhaps will discourage people from doing the floor slap when the guy is not that far from them. So it's a good laugh if nothing else. But Ohio State did manage to hang on and win that game in overtime. But it was pretty good comedy.
Very nice. Do have a little bit of breaking news here. Allison Hayes, reporter for the Big Ten Network, tweeted that Robert Johnson is in a walking boot and crutches, just said that nothing is broken. So take that for what it is worth. Obviously, I will tweet any other updates that we get. But again, I don't really anticipate knowing anything more until we get to the Illinois game. And frankly, I think that's good, because I think if we do hear anything soon, that means it's probably going to be bad news. And so if we don't hear anything, I consider that to be pretty good news. All right, real quick, fellas, let's go on the record with our picks. Hey, did everybody picked IU over Purdue, right? I think? Okay, good. All right, so is anybody going to give in to their fear of this Illinois game, or are we all picking the Hoosiers? Ryan, we'll go to you first.
Yep, go to the guy in the lead. I'm picking Indiana. I think this game scares the absolute crap out of me after an emotional high in a game like this. I think it's good that they have a few days to sort of celebrate this and then focus on Illinois. I think what scares me to death is Illinois going nuts from 3-point range, and it's one of those things where if a team shoots 60% from 3-point range, they're going to beat you regardless of how you play. And I'm just worried that something like that would happen. Not concerned about them beating us on the interior. I'm not concerned about them stopping us offensively. I'm concerned about them maybe going off and making it a save their season type game against us. But I'm still going to pick the Hoosiers. I think that they will put it together and win on the strength of their big men coming off of what was a great performance tonight. I think that Bielfeldt and Bryant will lead the way at Illinois.
Yeah, to that point, when Illinois beat Purdue, they went 9 for 17 from 3. Hill had 30. Nunn had 22. They also shot 28 free throws. Went 23 for 28 from the line. Purdue only shot 11 free throws. So, yeah, you're right, and crazy things like that can happen on the road. Andy, Indiana or Illinois?
I'm gonna take IU. I think hope that IU learned their lesson with the Penn State loss, and kind of coming off of a big game, slipped up. And so, I would like to think they're not going to overlook anybody no matter what the records are. So I think IU gets it done in Champaign.
And Will, Indiana or Illinois?
Have to go Indiana here. Just looking at, Illinois' record at home, I mean, they lost to Michigan by 10. They lost to Nebraska by 11. They lost to Iowa by 12. I mean, they could, like Ryan said, get hot, but I'm not too worried. So Indiana for me.
Yep, I'm picking the Hoosiers as well. I'd actually be a little bit more nervous if Indiana hadn't lost that game against Penn State. I think that was a good point, Ryan. I think the fact that they already had that loss and that Tom Crean will be able to easily get his players' attention to not overlook this Illinois game with the 2 kind of more marquee games against Iowa and Maryland coming up. I think that bodes well for Indiana. I think the fact that we get a little bit of a break. And I thought it was interesting. I saw on Twitter that Tom Crean in his press conference said he gave the guys Thursday off. And again, I think that's something to watch. We've talked about how this team has faded a little bit in recent seasons. And there have been some signs that Tom Crean has kind of taken his foot off the gas pedal a little bit and maybe not running the guys into the ground quite so much and kind of saving their legs a little bit. So I think that was good to see, maybe a little bit of an adjustment from the coach or something that hasn't worked in the past. He's shifting it up a little bit, and hopefully that will pay dividends here down the stretch, because this has been the time of the season where Indiana has struggled in the past. But now you look at it, a big win tonight over Purdue. They played well against Nebraska. Have won 3 out of the last 4. The game at Michigan State was forgettable, but all the games around it have been really good. So I think that's a good sign for Indiana, and I think they go up to Champaign and get the job done. But if that game happens to come down to defending an out-of-bounds play at the end, my God, Hoosiers, just defend the out-of-bounds play. I still have nightmares about that.
Cody Zeller's gone. Cody Zeller's gone, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, over to you first for last call.
Yeah, I just want to say I really, it was impressive how Indiana, all around, everyone stepped up tonight. The fans, you saw the videos of those kids lining up 7 hours or 6 hours before tip-off, around the block at Assembly Hall, around the track building, everything. It was unbelievable to see that for the general admission entrances. Tom Crean, I thought, stepped up, had some great coaching moves, made some great decisions, and really puzzled. He outcoached Matt Painter. I'm sorry, he just flat outcoached the guy. And Matt Painter is a guy a lot of people talk about being a great X's and O's technical coach. Who knows if it's true? I'm not gonna rule on that. But I thought it was Crean completely outcoached him, and Indiana out-hustled, outplayed, and out-muscled Purdue all day, and wanted this win more. It was something that we can all be proud about. Everybody stepped up, from the fans to the players to the coaches, and won this game. Indiana is solidly in first in the Big Ten with 3 games left. This is, as a fan, this is what you dream about. So as I've been saying for the last couple games, be excited, folks, because this is special, and it's something that doesn't come around very long. How many times in the past 20 years have we been able to say that Indiana's in first place in the Big Ten, controlling its own destiny with 3 games left? So great night to be a Hoosier. It's always a great night to be a Hoosier, but this is an especially great night to be a Hoosier. Absolutely.
Will, last call.
Before I get to my last call, I do want to throw in a quote real quick that Justin Albers tweeted out. This was Crean on Bielfeldt, and he said, "We didn't need him to come in here and be a babysitter. We needed him to come in here and be a leader." He's done that, and he really has. Ryan, it's your quote. Better than advertised. He came in here, and he's been stepping up, and especially in big games like this, I think his experience and his leadership is definitely showing through, and that's what I think is making this team just even stronger because, we've talked about it before. Sometimes Yogi isn't the best leader, but I'm not docking that at all because I think Yogi's been just fine in that category. But I think having another person like Bielfeldt, who's been in the Big Ten, has his experience, and can just set the example, has just been big for this team. And like Ryan said, they've been just fighting, and you saw it today. Hammond's, it scared me. He scored the 6, first points for Purdue tonight, and it's like, oh boy, it's going to be a long game. But, we kind of set him down, he got those fouls, and we kind of took over from there. So I'm excited. That game, I'm still just jacked from it. It was great to see. First time beating Purdue in a few years, so it's, we need to relish this game here for the week. The team should probably focus on Illinois, but we, the fans, can definitely relish in this game for a few days.
And once again, thank you, John Beeline. Andy, last call.
The one thing we didn't talk about was how things played out down the stretch, and I think it probably is a good point to tack on to what we were talking about with the Illinois game, is that again, kind of letting Purdue get back in the game. I thought IU took some quick shots that weren't necessarily great shots. They relaxed a little bit on defense in a way that they hadn't earlier in the game, and I think again, hopefully lessons learned there are ones they can carry forward to the Illinois game that they ought to win, because I think it's while it's great to blow somebody out, and certainly would have probably saved a year or two off of my life from tonight's game, it's great to win by 20, but it's also plenty of teaching moments toward the end of this one, and so I think that hopefully pays dividends for IU as they go into the Illinois game. But other than that, I think your point was great. I tweeted out the same picture that Jeff Rabjohns had of Yogi and Troy walking off the court. Just the joy that, quite honestly, if we look back a few months, we just weren't seeing and didn't think we'd ever see from those guys this year, based on how things have gone in Maui and against Duke. And while I agree with your point that you've made in the past about like you can't really give credit for a team getting back to the expectations that everybody had at the beginning of the year, I do think one of the great things about following a team that you love, or any college team for that matter, is like just seeing that pure joy after a big win, and that was what you saw in those guys' faces, which was really cool. So I think that's about as good as you can get. About as a 4-point win will do for me just fine. Great to beat Purdue. A good performance from a number of guys. We continue to see multiple players on this team be able to step up, and they're having fun doing it. And I think that's what I take away as much as anything of the looks on those guys' faces and how they've played. So I'll throw out that and a get well soon, Rojo, and we'll go from there and hopefully keep things rolling on Thursday at Illinois.
Man, Andy, that's such a great point. And what makes it so much more special is that it's Yogi and Troy. It's guys who have been here, one for 4 years, one in his third year. And has it always been a real smooth road with both of those guys? No. But that's how it's supposed to be in college sports and with young guys growing. And young guys need to grow and go through growing pains, and you hope that you have some seniors in your program that can help bring them along, a lot like how Michigan State does it. And I hope maybe that's what Indiana is starting to build now, which we haven't had for the last couple of years, which is why I think we've seemed like such a rudderless program the last couple of years. But now we have rudders. We have a guy like Yogi who has been through the battles and who is stepping up so much on both ends of the floor, and a guy like Max who can come in and be a leader. And same thing with Nick Zeisloft and Colin Hartman, and even Troy now maybe too. I mean, leadership has not really been a word that we've used to describe Troy, but that's what he has presented over these last two games. And I thought he was great tonight. And there's a comparison that I've heard some people make that they kind of hoped to see in terms of kind of looking at IU history and a guy that maybe Troy compares to. And I've hesitated to even talk about it, but after two games like this, think about what Landon Turner did for Indiana in 1981. A guy who came in with a lot of fanfare, clearly had so much talent, but was really infuriating to a lot of fans. And I wasn't around then. I was born in 1981, and so I wasn't around for Landon Turner, so a lot of this is what I'm hearing secondhand and from what I've read. But he was a guy that was in Bob Knight's doghouse, but worked his way into the starting lineup, so not a parallel there because Troy's been in the starting lineup. But the light apparently really went on for Landon the second half of that Big Ten season. And he became a star, and Indiana never lost another game with him in the starting lineup. And his play in the NCAA tournament is why that 1981 Indiana team was one of the most dominant NCAA tournament teams of all time in terms of margin of victory. And what we've seen from Troy the last couple of games is actual evidence of a light maybe turning on as he comes into the end of his junior year. And maybe the experience and the knowledge is now starting to catch up with the talent and the ability. And again, we need to see it on the road. We need to see it away from Assembly Hall. We need to see him continue to string these games back to back to back like Yogi does to really trust it. But this is 80 minutes of really good basketball for Troy after one of his worst performances of his career at Michigan State. And that shows maturity, and it shows resolve, and it shows that he's listening and starting to really understand what he does when he does well. And if he can become that kind of player, he's a guy who takes Indiana from, hey, this is a team that should make the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, to this is the team that could go to the Final Four and that could win a national championship in a very wide-open season of college basketball. That is not hyperbole. But Troy's got to keep doing it. He's got to keep playing like this. But for him to because this Purdue matchup is not a good one for him. Now, remember, last year he really struggled on the road against Purdue, played better in the home game where he was 6 of 11, was much more productive. And so he played well against Purdue in this home game. And who knows what would have happened at Mackey? We can't know that. All we know is that we've got 3 more Big Ten games, the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament. And one of the biggest factors in how Indiana does will be how Troy plays. I know I'm sure feeling a lot better about it after these last 2 games. And if he can keep this going, he becomes a huge difference maker for Indiana, a lot like Landon Turner was in 1981. Maybe at the end of the season there's an even more direct parallel there between those 2 guys. It's up to Troy. He's got the ability. He clearly showed it tonight. And if he keeps doing this, sky's the limit for these Indiana Hoosiers. Awesome win tonight for Indiana. Hoosiers now sitting at 12-3, 3 games left to go. All of the goals at the start of the season are right there out in front of this team. It's a great place to be in. Kudos to everybody. This was a program win tonight. The fans were great. The coach was great. The players were great. And despite a valiant effort from Purdue in the end, the Hoosiers hold on 77-73. Great win, Indiana. We will be back next week to talk to you after IU Illinois. Until then, enjoy this win, and we'll talk to you next week, everybody. Have a good one.